What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And my wonderful guest today, who I'm so grateful is here, and I'm also grateful is pretty much anywhere on the planet, is Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds. Hello, Doctor.
Hi, Gary. Thanks so much for having me on. You can call me Jeff, by the way. We got the formal introductions out of the way. I consider this a conversation among friends. So call me Jeff, and I look forward to chatting with you.
Outstanding, outstanding. Well, Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and read your quick little bio here, and then we'll get cooking if that's okay with you.
Perfect.
Go Biz. All right, everybody. We have Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds is an author, Ironman Triathlete, two-time cancer survivor, and nonprofit executive from Long Island, New York. He's the author of Every Mile Matters, turning triathlon training into cancer triumph, which immediately became a top new release in several categories on Amazon. Every Mile Matters is a powerful memoir that draws parallels between Jeff endured sports training and surviving two cancer diagnoses within 2 years. Prostate cancer, followed by stage 3B colorectal cancer. Reynolds is an avid triathlete and 15-time marathon runner, demonstrates how the mental toughness, discipline, and perseverance she developed through swimming, biking, and running became essential tools for navigating cancer treatment, from radiation and chemotherapy to recovery. The book explores how cancer transforms a person physically, emotionally, spiritually, and socially, while offering practical insights on building resilience, finding purpose in adversity, and living with intentionality. More than just a cancer survival story, it's a guide for anyone facing life's inevitable challenges, emphasizing that the same grit required to cross finish lines can carry us through our darkest moments and toward a more meaningful existence. And that is all wonderful stuff. I think all of our cancer survivors out there and people who haven't survived get that, right, sir?
I think so, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a message that tends to resonate, and the reality is that most people at this point in time, know somebody or have had some personal experience with the disease.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get us started because we have so much to do. I want to get into your story real quick, but I want to ask you the what if you could question. It's something I ask everybody. So, Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, have you ever had a what if you could moment in your life, or is there a what if you could thought you'd love to share for everybody?
Yeah, so I have had that, and now I have it every day. And what I mean by that is, at the end of 2020, I started thinking about kind of my goals for the following year. And like everybody does, you set out some New Year's resolutions, half of which you abandoned by February 15th of the following year. For me, it was a little bit different. I registered for Ironman Florida, which was going to happen in November of 2021, which meant that I had, almost a year to train for this thing. I had done races before, but an Ironman consists of a 2.4 mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and then a full 26.2 mile marathon. If you don't complete it in under 17 hours straight, then you are disqualified. So there was no taking a rest. There's no sitting down and having lunch. None of that happens. And I thought to myself, it's a really big challenge. It scares me a little bit, which means that it's exactly the thing I should be doing. And so, when I set out to do that, I thought, suppose I could actually do this. Like, what would it mean? Yeah, I didn't know the rest of what was to unfold. But I had started out, as part of a midlife crisis, probably doing 5K races, then 10K races, and then half marathons, and that wasn't enough. And so I did a couple marathons, and then it wasn't um, satisfactory to be mediocre at one sport. I went to be mediocre at three sports: swimming, biking, and running. And so, that was my what if I could moment, and, pretty prophetic. And I'll get into that as we go through the story. But that was my moment. And I would say, given where I am now, I have a lot of those moments every day. And one of the things about staring down cancer or any other serious disease or even life challenges, once you walk through that, it's like, bring it. Everything else seems easy.
Oh, I get that. Trust me on that. But it seems like you were searching for pain. I've done a number of triathlons. My son did an Ironman.
Mhm.
It's wicked, man. People have no idea how wicked an Ironman is. You could watch it on TV, but no, you can't feel it. So, were you searching for pain? I mean, you kept pushing yourself like that. What was going on there?
I don't look, it part of it was a midlife crisis. So it was either I, dyed my hair, bought some skinny jeans and cruised the local community college. Or,
And
I
and
tried
don't
to be
forget the red convertible. You needed the
right,
red
right,
convertible.
right, right. Or, I did something productive. And so that was part of it. But also, one of the things I found during just straight marathon runs was that, mile 18 to 21 is a really, really ugly place. The wheels begin to fall off. It's ugly. By the time you get to 23, 24, 25, you're like, all right, well, I'm basically done, right? This is finished. And I made it through it. By the time you get to 26.2, you're registering for the next one, right? It's like women who have babies again and again.
But when
And
you hit
so,
that wall at 18 or 20, you just want to die. That's why they call
yeah,
it the wall.
it's an ugly, ugly place. But, part of this was getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? So, mile 18 is terrible, but the reality is you keep going, right? Your mind fights with your legs, you keep going, and then you make it through. And so, for me, going into the cancer diagnoses, those tests of will, of strength, of endurance really became the testament to what was possible. So when I was diagnosed the first time, it was of all days, April 1st, April Fool's Day of the following year after Ironman. Um, Went for a routine prostate cancer screening as part of a physical, had no symptoms, nothing going on, and the test came back positive. And so you go through a whole series of diagnostic tests. They figure out what the deal is. I found out via a text message that I had stage 2 prostate cancer. I had that oh my God moment because nobody wants to hear those three words. You have cancer, but 2 million people do a year here in America, and so immediately where my mind went to was, so if I have prostate cancer now, it's April. I had prostate cancer back in November. I had prostate cancer when I did Ironman Florida. I did Ironman Florida with cancer. I could do this. Like I do hard things. I do things that are lousy. Um, and I can get through. And, thankfully, I was diagnosed in April, had surgery in July, and was back out again. I did the New York City Marathon that year. And so,
Wow.
I
Wow.
was back. In fact, the month of my surgery, I had said to my doctor, I'm like, so like I know you told me I'm not supposed to run. Suppose I do, like in a challenging kind of way. And he's like, well, I'm gonna have to go in and fix everything that I just did, and there's zero chance you're gonna run the marathon. I said, walking? He's like, all right, you could walk. So I walked 230 miles that month. Um, just to stay out there and to prove that I could. So I go through that, back to normal, bump in the road, that kind of thing. I've now become an evangelist for routine screenings, telling anyone who will listen, go get a colonoscopy, get a PSA test, get a mammography if you're a woman, that kind of thing. Following August, I go and get a routine colonoscopy because I'm over the age of 45. I wake up, best sleep you could ever have, by the way. I wake up, doctor says, look, I took out a couple polyps, but I also found a significant mass. And like I could just tell from his demeanor, like significant was significant. And
Yeah.
I asked him that. I said, so how significant? He's like, it's very significant. You need to get a surgical referral on the way out. I'm like, okay, I guess so. Um, and so, then thrown into this world of diagnostic testing, and I would be diagnosed with stage 3B colorectal cancer. For me, stage B is precariously close to stage 4. Um, Survival rates are pretty mixed when it comes to this kind of thing, but they're a lot better if you get it early. And so, by all accounts, gotten relatively early, but certainly not when it happened. Um, I would then go through a pretty aggressive course of treatment that included 27 rounds of chemo, 27 rounds of radiation, a short treatment break, and then chemo infusions every other week for 6 months. The good news is, and I don't want to give away the punchline, but the good news is there's no evidence of disease. I'm in the clear now. I've been in the clear for about 16 months. Um, and I'm back to racing and feeling good. And so, it's almost like this for full circle moment. There's a lot that kind of went into that entire thing that we can unpack. But there was a part of me the second time around where I thought, two cancers in 2 years? What did I do wrong? Really? How did this all happen? One of the big distinctions I had to make, Gary, was, you know, a lot of folks said to me, they're like, aren't you like an Ironman or something? Like, how do you have two cancers in 2 years? Well, health isn't the same as fitness. They're two very different things. I'm pretty fit, but clearly my health needed my attention. Um, thank God for the power of routine exams. And, I continue to be an evangelist that people should get routine exams. There are folks and probably folks that will come on your show and say, look, cancer was a gift that taught me so many things. Cancer is no gift. I do not consider it a gift in any way, shape, or form. I will say it offered me some blessings along the way, but in no way, shape, or form is it a gift. And look, the diagnosis is scary, the treatment is hard. I took some things out of it. You mentioned the book. The book is called Every Mile Matters, and it's about how I took my triathlon experience and applied it to treatment. And so there was a point during treatment, the tail end of it. I'm part of a clinical trial, and so I'm still monitored very, very aggressively. And so we were going to do 8 chemo infusions, and that's basically you pack up your stuff, you go to an infusion center for the day. They infuse you, and then you get a little take-home pump that you bring home with you. It's this little pack that you bring home with you. We were at treatment 6 of 8, and my doctor said to me, he's like, your blood counts are plummeting, the side effects are mounting up. I'm not sure we should continue. And I looked at him, and without saying anything, he's like, but I know you're never going to do that. He's like, I know you won't quit. And I said, that's right. Like we said at the outset, my best chance for survival was to do 8 of these infusions. God help me, we're doing 8. And if I have to go buy chemo on the street because you won't give it to me, then that's what I'm going to do. But we are getting this thing done. We're not taking any shortcuts. And so
Are fentanyl dealers dealing chemo now too? Can you get
they
this
might
stuff
they
on the
might have
street?
switched over, the
I
crack,
don't know. I don't know
the
because they're
crackdown's
cracking
good.
down on fentanyl. But Jeff, 27 chemos is insane.
Yeah.
27. I mean, I've had cancer. I've gone through chemo and radiation. 27 chemo. I lost my wife to cancer. I don't even know if she had 27 chemo. That's a lot of chemo. And then if you went to the pump and did 8 more, I mean, that's a lot. I think
Yeah.
that's where you talk about where you literally changes for you physically, emotionally, spiritually, and socially. That's a lot of chemo. That's going to change your whole DNA, your whole
Yes.
chemistry of everything.
Yeah, yeah, it does. And I would say, a couple things. Going into it in good shape was like money in the bank.
Yeah.
And so, my doctor said, like, we could probably do this with you because you're in good shape, you can withstand it, you're pretty tough inside. And so, we think that you can manage this and it gives you the best chance of clearance. When I went and saw my oncologist, who I love dearly, um, one of the things they ask you about is, how you sleeping, are you stressed, and that kind of thing. I'm like, dude, I've had 2 cancers. Of course I'm stressed. And he's like, well, I want to show you these meditation videos, and this is how you visualize the tumor. I'm like, hold up. You got the wrong guy. I appreciate all this. It's lovely, but I want the most powerful radiation chemo available to me, and just kill the cancer. And so, look, it weighed heavily
I'm not
on
going to make friends with my tumor. I'm just not
right,
doing it. I'm not going to
right.
meditate on
Not
it.
going to
We're not going to
meditate.
break bread and have
Right.
chi. I'm going to kill it. I don't want.
Right. Right. Give me the most powerful stuff. And so, and look, I recognize there's a downside to all of that, right? So chemo is a toxic substance. It gets mailed to you and dispensed to you in black and yellow containers with, radioactive signs all over it. And so, I understand that. And, the trade-off becomes, what's the thing that can take me out in 6 months versus what's the thing that has lasting effects. And,
Yeah.
I will say cancer has side effects. Doctors, they don't use the term remission anymore for whatever reason. They call it, there's
Yeah.
no evidence of disease. And I'm fortunate to have no evidence of disease, but there's lots of evidence of the disease having been there.
Yeah.
And, some of that is the tingling that I still feel in my feet and in my hands. Some of it is just weird stuff that happens to you because chemo changes your body so much. But I would also say, cancer and its treatment leaves behind a psychological trail as well. I had to wrestle with, this is the body that carried me through long races, and now you betrayed me. Really? How dare you break? Right? I got things to do. Um, but
I'm an
also,
Iron Man, for crying out loud. Don't
right,
you know who
right,
I am?
right, right. And but on the flip side, you learn gratitude, you're more in touch with your body, your friendships tend to strengthen around this. I wrote a lot in the book about some of my male friendships and guy friends who would say to me after we had lunch, "I love you." And not like the backslapping, we're all drunk kind of thing, love you,
Yeah.
man. Like really heartfelt kind of things. And the first couple of times it happened, I was completely thrown off. And my immediate thought was, am I going to die? Like they're telling me that I look good, everything seems to be going well, but they're telling me this. They must think I'm going to die. Like that's the only reason they would be doing this. And so, I spent a lot of time talking with my friends and, even sometimes saying, like, why did you say that? Like, because I care about you and we've been friends for 30 years and why wouldn't I? I'm like, well, I don't know. And so it does change those friendships. It changes your perspective on things. One of the
There's a
things,
there's a mental game too, because every time you go in, I mean, I'm NED. We all want to be NED,
yeah,
right? But there's still the scan anxiety. It's like
yes,
every time you've got a scan scheduled, you get that scan anxiety, right? The scan anxiety, and then it's like, Doc, why does it take 2 weeks to tell me what the scan said? Dude, you could read it right there. Just tell me what the dang thing says.
right,
It's
right.
waiting, for the results too. So there's so much mental to even when you're NED, right? There's a lot of
There is.
mental games that go on.
I'm very glad you brought that up. I mentioned that I'm monitored very aggressively. So it's like every 3 months, a CAT scan, MRI, sigmoidoscopy. It feels like they happen like day after day. It's amazing how fast 3 months goes. And I recently had a 2-year colonoscopy. And so it was 2 years since I was diagnosed. That's how I was diagnosed the last time. And I will say, every time I go back for the test, I go to the same parking garage where the infusion center is. When I was doing the infusions, it was winter, it was cold and dark. I remember like it was yesterday. And every time I go back there, it's like, oh, back in that place. I'm the guy in, a spandex tri-suit. I'm not the one like with an IV pole and a gown in the back kind of thing. And so it is tough, even as I published the book. So the book came out on August 8th, which was the 2-year anniversary of my diagnosis with colorectal cancer. Um, and in the week leading up to it, I would have these dreams where I woke up that there had been a reoccurrence. And my first thought was, the book is already done. Like, what do I say then? Right? Because we're in that kind of gray zone where the book is done, it's not out yet. And,
I
God
better
forbid.
not have cancer again, or I'm
Right,
screwed. I got
right, right.
to.
I don't have time for this. But I will say there was, I told some of this story the other day. My wife, who brought me to every chemo infusion session religiously, was a better caretaker than I think I would be to her, would pack up this black Stanley cup for me full of water because the more water you drink, you flush out the chemo and that kind of thing. To this day, I see that cup from across the room and I feel nauseous. And so, it doesn't leave. And so that anxiety is there. On the flip side, there's things that you're grateful for. When I was sitting in the infusion room, I would see people, probably med students and nurses kind of running by outside, getting their workouts in. And I'm like, I'm sitting in an infusion chair and I'm like, man, what I wouldn't give to be out there again. And now I am. And
Yeah.
so now it's not like, and I have a pretty prescribed workout plan. Now it's, not I have to run 5 miles today. It's I get to run 5 miles today. I get to come to work and do my thing. I get to connect with other people, and
Yeah.
you just learn to reframe some of the things. And people talk about the grind. You know, one of one of the wisecracks people come back with when you say, "Oh, how you doing?" They'll just say, "Living the dream." And there's a part of me that's really sad about that because, face down a diagnosis, you realize that we actually all are living the dream, whether we
Yeah.
know it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when when you're with your book, you cover that. It's not just about the cancer battle. It's not just surviving the cancer. It's not just the mental toughness it takes to do the training, the swimming, even the boredom and the repetition sometimes of just lap after lap after lap, right? And sometimes we could fall into that with our lives. We just fall into a routine and it gets boring and we're just not really paying attention. We're just swimming laps. We're just moving along. And I think, you touch on that. It's like you've got to realize that every moment that lap is might be your last lap. Let's make it awesome. The running, the training, right? I mean, it really is about every moment.
Yeah, look, there's no promises. That's one of the things I learned through all of this. And look, if my treatment hadn't gone well, I would have had some notice that it didn't go well, right? They would have said, "Look, your tumor is really not responding. We're going to
Yeah.
try surgery." At some point, they say, I think we're at the end of the road here. Yeah, okay, doc, how much longer do I have? And you have that conversation, and then you ignore everything they tell you and continue on. Um, but there are people that don't have that opportunity, right? There are people who will lose their lives spontaneously to something else, who have that opportunity to have the wake call on the shoulder to say, look, these moments really matter more than you know. I think I wrote in the book about, I don't remember if I included it or not, but it's almost like for all of us, there's this invisible countdown clock, and I envision it kind of like above my desk, and it's counting down, uh, whether you're paying attention or not, whether you're enjoying life or not. In the book, I wrote a little bit about the cancer card, and in some ways, when you're diagnosed, you care more about what people think. In other cases, you care less. You're like, shit, I have cancer, right? So, the cancer card is, and in retrospect, I wish I had played it more because there's things that I did where I'm like, you know what? Perfect time to say I'm not feeling well. I have cancer, right? I didn't take 5 minutes off from work. I could have called in sick, not with a cold, but with cancer.
Yeah.
So it's like, geez, if you ever need an excuse to not go to a stupid event in the evening, that's the cancer is it.
Well,
Um,
I'll tell you what pisses me off is my sons, because I just hit everything from them, all the treatment stuff, because they went through with their mom, right? They lost their mom to cancer, so they watch her deteriorate. They watch all the thing, and when I would go by those rooms now to walk in to do my treatment, I'm like, oh God, the flashbacks were so
yeah.
wicked, right? So I'm like, I'm not making my kids go through this. I don't want them to experience this with me. But now when I was like real sick, my kids like, you wuss, come on, let's go snowboarding, let's get up, let's go. I'm like,
Right, right,
dude, I don't feel that great today, right? But
right, right.
you don't want to play the cancer because that's not how we're built, right? Just like screw it, I'll just go run another lap or I'll just do that. But there are times when dude, I'm hurting,
And you
and
got to
here's
take care of
why.
yourself, right? So whether or not you have cancer, you got to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you realize when you deal with, a couple diagnoses, you probably appreciate it more than anybody. At the end of the day, nobody's going to be pissed off that you took a day off from work. Nobody's even going to notice. Your family's going to be surrounding you with, love and affection and that kind of thing. And, I think if we all had the ability to go back and do things again with maybe a loved one in our own life, we'd say, I want to spend more time with the people who really matter. I don't need to go to a cocktail party. I don't need to speak at another event. I just rather spend some time with the people I love. And so you shouldn't need cancer to get that wake up call.
Yeah, yeah. This is just flying by. I lied earlier. I said I only had one question, but I actually have two questions. So before we get out of here, I did want to ask you one other question. And the last question is, if there was a thought that Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds had, a saying, a thought, a quote from your book, a quote you saw, could be from a Chinese cookie, whatever. There's something that you'd like to share with us before we get out of here. What would that last thought be that you want to share with everybody?
I think it's keep going, right? You don't use expletives on the show because I would throw one in the middle of that to make it even more interesting. But it's keep going. And so, I learned that in triathlon. I learned that in cancer. I've learned that in life. As I said in the book, I was one of these kids that grew up and teachers said, well, you could go one way or the other. Either things are going to be really good with him or really not so good. But you keep going and you keep powering through, and ultimately it's not a finish line you're looking for, but it is that moment of glory, and it will be there for you if you trust in the process. Two other things I would offer: things that don't challenge you won't change you. If you really want to
Mm,
change who you are and how you think and what you do and how you're perceived, do something that scares the hell out of you.
mm-hmm.
Ironman scared the hell out of me. It was all voluntary, that kind of thing. Cancer wasn't voluntary and it scared the hell out of me. But I made it through. And my attitude now is you want to come at me a third time, I'll win again, right? So so that's the second thing. And then the third thing is the right support team is critical, right? If you've done tries, you know that you need kind of people that are going to cheer you on. You need volunteers that are going to set up the course. You need lifeguards who are going to keep you safe. It's not, although it seems like a solo sport, it's not. Neither is cancer, neither is navigating any other serious illness, and neither is life. Figure out who you want on your support team and then hug those people as tightly and closely as you can.
And I love that. That is a great message to finish on because it's so true. It's so true. And love your attitude, brother. I love your attitude. I love what you're doing. I know that when we hear those words, you've got cancer. Whether it's for you or for anybody else, whether it's for a friend, it's a family member, they are wicked words, and they could strike a lot of fear into your heart. And you could either curl up in a ball and say, screw it, I'm out of here, or you can go run a Ironman.
That's exactly
And
it.
whichever works best. So, Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, what's coming up for you next? What do you have cooking coming up next?
Yeah, look, the response to the book has been amazing. And the part I like the most is hearing from folks who have been diagnosed, hearing from folks who aren't sure where to turn, hearing from fellow survivors who say, I made it through too. That's been the most heartwarming thing. I've been invited to do a bunch of speeches at support groups and on behalf of cancer organizations to raise some of the awareness about early detection and testing. And so, it's a matter of taking this, look, awareness helps kind of shine a light on all this stuff. Cancer thrives in darkness and that kind of thing. And so anytime I could shine a light on early detection, taking care of yourself, taking care of your body, and finding a way to survive this thing, then that's time well spent. So I think that's what's coming up next.
That's awesome. So the book is Every Mile Matters, Turning Triathlon Training into Cancer Triumph by Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds. Where can we find the book and where can we find more Jeffrey Reynolds?
Sure, it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble. Also have a website for the book. It's everymilematters.com.
Awesome. All right, Doc. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your message. Keep kicking ass, keep going after it. Don't quit now, right? You got another 50 years. You'll be the oldest triathlon guy in the world. I can see it.
I'll win my age group without a problem.
I
Thank you
love
so
it.
much, Gary.
All
Pleasure
right.
speaking with you today.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. See you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.